The expansive conference center of Celestia Dynamics hummed with excitement as the brightest minds from San Francisco's tech scene, high-level executives, and eager journalists filled the auditorium, their gazes locked on the unfolding spectacle on stage. At the forefront stood Amara Torres, a 35-year-old woman clad in a crisp white blouse and worn blue jeans, appearing starkly out of place among the tailored suits and lab coats. Inside her lay the heart of the P9000 drone engine, a $2.5 million masterpiece of innovation that had bewildered Celestia's elite team for 3 exhaustive days. Sebastian Lark, the company's CEO, clutched the microphone with dramatic flair, his voice heavy with disdain. "This woman thinks she can join our elite engineering squad? No degree, no credentials, just sheer audacity." He flung a wrench at Amara's feet, the metallic clang echoing against the sleek floor. "You have 30 minutes to rectify what my top engineers couldn't. Fail and you'll be gone for good." The audience erupted in derisive laughter. Amara bent down, grasping the wrench with trembling fingers, a flicker of old anguish passing through her emerald eyes. But they didn't know her true story. What would you do if you were in Amara's position? Stand your ground or retreat? Sometimes the greatest strength lies in embracing your true self. Share your thoughts below, and let's explore if dignity can indeed triumph over arrogance. Amara Torres lived in a modest apartment in the heart of San Francisco, where the sounds of bustling streets mingled with the gentle breeze rustling through her window. Each morning at precisely 5 a.m., she brewed a cup of black coffee in a chipped mug and sat by the window, gazing at the vibrant tech district. She had once... No, she shook her head, dismissing the memories. Her neighbors knew her as the reserved librarian who shelved books and assisted students with their studies. Her wardrobe consisted of simple blouses from thrift shops, paired with the same pair of scuffed sneakers every day. Her dark curls tied back in a practical bun. No jewelry adorned her fingers, and no makeup enhanced her natural beauty. Mrs. Thompson from the adjacent apartment often remarked to other tenants that Amara seemed like such a nice woman, but there was an unmistakable sadness about her. Something fractured she carried like an unseen burden. What Mrs. Thompson didn't know was that Amara had recently applied for a role at Celestia Dynamics, the leading tech company in California. Not as a senior engineer or lead designer, positions that would have been hers by right in a different life, but merely as an entry-level technician, the kind that fresh graduates typically filled. When asked about her qualifications during the initial interview, she had been intentionally vague. Education? I gained my knowledge through hands-on experience. Previous employment? Various repair shops around the Bay Area, mainly fixing gadgets. Samuel Reed, the hiring manager, had looked at her with barely concealed skepticism, questioning why a woman of her age would settle for such a junior position. "You don't possess any formal training, no certifications." Amara had met his gaze steadily. Sometimes passion matters more than papers. However, the practical assessment told a different story altogether. The way she diagnosed technical issues by sound alone, how her nimble fingers danced across mechanical components with an intimacy that spoke of years of expertise. She had completed the evaluation in half the allocated time, identifying problems that even their senior technicians had overlooked. News spread rapidly throughout Celestia's headquarters about the enigmatic woman with no credentials but extraordinary talent. The whispers reached Sebastian Lark himself, and his reaction was swift and visceral. "Impossible," he had snarled during the Monday morning board meeting. "No untrained woman can outshine my Stanford engineers." His pride refused to accept it. It simply would not allow it. Thus, the special interview had been arranged, not to assess Amara's abilities, but to publicly humiliate her, to demonstrate once and for all that technical brilliance belonged exclusively to those with prestigious degrees and the right gender. Amara was aware of this. She had understood it the moment she received the invitation, yet she came anyway, carrying secrets that would shatter every assumption in that room. 5 years ago, in Seattle, Washington, the main auditorium of the Space Exploration Center sparkled with camera flashes and jubilant celebration. Dr. Amara Torres, just 30 years old, stood at the podium in a tailored navy suit that highlighted her professional elegance. She had just received accolades as the youngest chief engineer in the history of their latest drone program, Her groundbreaking propulsion system had reduced energy consumption by 40% while enhancing efficiency by 60%. Dr. Torres hasn't merely advanced our mission to explore the skies. Program Director announced to thunderous applause. She's redefined the boundaries of what's achievable in drone technology. Amara's eyes searched the crowd for one face that mattered more than all the accolades. David Chen, her fiancé and research partner, beamed from the front row. They had developed this technology together, spending countless nights in the lab, crafting their dreams side by side. Tomorrow, they would file the joint patent. Next week, they would marry in a cozy ceremony surrounded by their colleagues. But that night, everything shattered like glass under pressure. Amara had returned to the lab to retrieve her personal notebook, only to find David hunched over her computer, copying the entire database of classified research onto external drives. "David, what are you doing?" Her voice trembled between confusion and growing dread. He turned without remorse, devoid of even the pretense of guilt. "I'm doing what I should have done months ago. Aerotech offered $50 million for this technology, for me alone." The words landed like heavy blows. "This is our work. The company's work. You can't just—" His laughter sliced through her protests, sharp and cruel. "Our work. Please, Amara. Do you think anyone believes a woman your age designed this? You're just a pretty face, sweetheart." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could. 5 years together, countless shared dreams, whispered promises in the early morning hours after breakthrough discoveries, had all been a facade, a coldly calculated manipulation. David had positioned himself perfectly, documenting every interaction to portray himself as the lead researcher while she appeared merely as his assistant. When she tried to stop him from leaving with the drives, he triggered a false security alert, claiming she was the one stealing classified materials. In the ensuing chaos, David deliberately sabotaged the lab's safety systems to obliterate evidence. The explosion that resulted left Amara with severe nerve damage in her right hand, the very hand that had sketched countless designs, crafted prototypes, and reached for the stars. 6 months of investigation followed, but David had been meticulous. Falsified emails, doctored security footage, bought testimonies from colleagues he had groomed for years. Amara found herself branded a traitor, quietly dismissed by the company to avoid public scandal. The deepest wound wasn't professional destruction or physical injury. It was the realization that David had been recruited by Aerotech from the beginning, tasked with getting close to the most promising engineer at the company. "You were perfect," he had told her during one of the depositions, his tone casual as if discussing the weather. "Brilliant enough to develop what we needed, naive enough to trust completely." Her life's work now bore his name, her dreams crushed beneath corporate greed and calculated betrayal. The night she left Seattle, Amara packed away her engineering degrees, her commendations, and the engagement ring she never got to wear. Standing in her empty apartment, she made a choice. She wouldn't fight in courts that had already condemned her. She wouldn't plead for justice from a system that valued credentials over truth. She would simply vanish, become someone forgettable, someone who could find solace in anonymity. But now, 5 years later, standing in Celestia Dynamics with David's stolen design glaring back at her, the past and present collided with devastating force. The crowd in Celestia's auditorium grew restless with anticipation, their hunger for humiliation palpable in the recycled air. Sebastian Lark strutted across the stage like a peacock, savoring every moment of what he assumed would be Amara's demise. "Ladies and gentlemen," he proclaimed with theatrical grandiosity, "today we witness why Celestia Dynamics only hires the best. Credentialed, the proven, the worthy." His eyes locked onto Amara with predatory satisfaction. "Miss Torres here believes she can join our elite team. No degrees, no recognized experience, just misplaced confidence." The audience tittered with cruel amusement. Lucas Morgan, head of engineering, stepped forward, his prestigious Stanford ring glimmering under the lights. "Sebastian, this is a waste of time. Obviously, she's just another dreamer who watched too many online tutorials." Maya Patel, the lead engineer, added her voice to the mockery. "I reviewed her application, library work, fixing gadgets in neighborhood shops. This isn't where amateurs tinker with toys. This is where true engineers handle million-dollar technology. Her words dripped with the kind of institutional arrogance that Amara had once navigated back when she had the credentials to defend herself. But now, stripped of titles and degrees, she stood exposed to their collective contempt. A young engineer, barely 25 with a fresh Stanford diploma, pointed at Amara's slightly trembling right hand. "Look, she's shaking already. Probably never seen a real drone engine up close." The laughter crescendoed. Camera phones rose to capture the spectacle. Local tech journalists scribbled notes, already crafting headlines about the deluded woman who dared challenge San Francisco's engineering elite. "The P9000 has a critical flaw," Sebastian continued, gesturing dramatically at the massive engine. "My best engineers, all Ivy League graduates, spent 3 days searching for it. Miss Torres has 30 minutes. He paused for effect, allowing the impossibility of the task to sink in. "When she fails, and she will fail, perhaps it will teach others like her to know their place." As her fingers brushed the cool metal surface, memories crashed over her like a tidal wave. Late nights at the lab, the joy of innovation, the passion that had driven her to revolutionize drone technology, and David's hands covering hers as they worked. A gesture she had once considered romantic but now recognized as possession, control, theft. Clocks ticking. Maya taunted, "Need help finding the engine cover? Or shall we call a real engineer?" The crowd laughed again, but Amara had already begun her examination. What she saw made her blood run cold. This wasn't just similar to her original design. It was her design, modified and corrupted by someone who didn't grasp the underlying principles. The resonance frequency was incorrect. The compression ratio miscalibrated. At high altitude, this engine would experience catastrophic failure. Whoever had sold this design, whether David directly or through corporate channels, had created a flying death trap. 20 minutes. Sebastian announced gleefully. "I don't suppose you need instructions on which end is up." More laughter, more phones recording. But Amara's mind raced through calculations, possibilities, implications. She could expose the truth now, reveal who she was, what this engine truly represented. But looking at the eager faces waiting for her failure, she realized they wouldn't believe her. Not without proof. Not without demonstrating abilities that no garage technician should possess. The young Stanford graduate stepped closer, emboldened by her silence. "Maybe she's praying. Hey lady, this is engineering, not a prayer circle. Prayers won't fix metal." Amara's hands stilled over the drone engine. For 5 years, she had hidden from this world, from the pain and betrayal it embodied. But now, faced with a corrupted version of her life's work that could endanger innocent lives, she had a choice to make. Let pride win and walk away, or reveal the truth and risk everything she had built in her quiet life since. 20 minutes gone. Amara's hands had mapped every component of the corrupted engine, her mind cataloging each deviation from her original design. The crowd's mockery had reached a fever pitch, but she could barely hear them anymore. Her right hand, damaged in the explosion David had caused, cramped painfully as she worked. The nerve damage made precise movements difficult. Each delicate gesture a small victory against physical limitation. 10 minutes left. Sebastian announced with undisguised glee. "It appears Miss Torres is finally realizing the difference between fixing a toaster and aerospace engineering." Amara set down her tools and stepped back from the engine. The hall fell silent. Anticipating her admission of defeat, she reached into her pocket, fingers finding the small aerospace pin she always carried. Its surface worn smooth from 5 years of secret handling. The inscription caught the light. "Ad astra per aspera," to the stars, through difficulties. In that moment, standing before 200 people who saw her as nothing, Amara remembered the 8-year-old girl who had watched the space shuttle launch from Kennedy Space Center. That little girl had vowed to build the engines that would take humanity to new heights. She recalled her mother's words the night before her departure for university. "Amara, you were born to fly high. Don't let anyone clip your wings." But mostly, she remembered her team at the aerospace company. The brilliant minds who had trusted her vision, collaborated with her, believed in the future they were creating together. Those people deserved better than seeing their work perverted into this dangerous counterfeit. The dream deserved better. Are you giving up? Maya Chen's voice sliced through her reverie, sharp with satisfaction. We don't have all day for your little performance. Amara looked through the conference room windows at the gray San Francisco sky. Beyond those clouds lay the vast universe she had once aspired to conquer. She could walk away now, return to her quiet life at the library. Let the past remain buried. But if this engine flew and failed, if lives were lost because she chose silence over truth, could she live with that? Her mother had taught her that integrity wasn't about being acknowledged for doing what's right. It was about doing right, especially when no one would applaud you for it. 5 minutes. Sebastian's voice boomed. Time to admit what everyone already knows. Amara turned back to face them, and something in her expression made the front row step back instinctively. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that silenced even Sebastian Lark. I need a digital micromodulator and precision pressure calibration kit. Matua and Fluke models specifically. The transformation in her demeanor was so sudden, so complete, that several people gasped audibly. Unless, she continued with deadly calm, you want this engine to explode at 40,000 feet. Lucas Morgan stammered in shock at Amara's sudden metamorphosis. What did you say? Explode. But Amara had already turned back to the engine. Her movements now swift and decisive despite her damaged hand, with practiced efficiency that spoke of years of expertise. She disassembled the pressure regulation system in 30 seconds flat, something Celestia's entire Stanford team had failed to accomplish in 3 days. Look here. She pointed to a microscopic flaw, her voice resonating with absolute certainty. The resonance frequency is out of sync with the compression ratio at cruising altitude. The pressure differential will induce harmonic vibrations throughout the combustion chamber. Complete structural failure within minutes. Maya Chan pushed forward, her face draining of color. That's impossible. How could you know? The resonance frequency of... Because this is a modified Orion design, Amara interrupted, hands never pausing in their work. Someone copied it without understanding the fundamental principles. The compression ratio must be exactly 14.7 to 1, not 15.2 as configured here. Sebastian Lark stood frozen. Is Orion, the aerospace Orion engine? How could you possibly? But Amara was already deep in the repair, her voice reciting specifications with machine-like precision. Fuel injection timing, 23.7 microseconds. Turbine speed, 97,300 RPM. Bypass ratio, 5.1 to 1. Each figure was exact. Impossible to know without access to classified aerospace documents or being the original designer. The audience watched in stunned silence as Amara recalibrated the entire system with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed. The young Stanford engineer who had mocked her earlier now stared with his mouth agape. These weren't the actions of a mere technician or librarian. This was mastery at the highest level, the kind that came from years of pioneering work in aerospace engineering. Done, Amara announced, setting down her tools. She initiated the test sequence, and the engine roared to life with a sound so perfectly calibrated it was almost musical. Every parameter on the diagnostic screen glowed green. Optimal readings across the board. Who are you? Lucas Morgan's voice cracked with disbelief. Amara wiped her hands on a cloth and then turned to face the assembled crowd. The tremor in her damaged hand had vanished, replaced by the steady confidence of someone who had nothing left to conceal. I'm the person who warned the aerospace company about this exact failure mode 5 years ago. When I designed the original Orion engine, the revelation hit the room with physical force impossible. Maya Chun protested, her voice rising to near hysteria. The Orion engine was designed by Dr. Amara Torres, and she's gone. Gone. Disappeared. Disgraced. Amara's laugh held no humor, only a deep, resonating sadness. I'm standing right here. You just couldn't see me beyond your assumptions. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing extensive scarring that covered her right arm, the tissue damage extending from wrist to elbow. The explosion that had extinguished her aerospace career was etched into her skin. Dr. Torres, An elderly journalist in the third row rose shakily to his feet, his voice trembling with recognition. Amara Torres, the prodigy who was going to take us to new heights. Amara nodded once, a simple confirmation that shattered 200 worlds of assumption. The room erupted into chaos. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. Phones rang with urgent calls to editors. And Sebastian Lark gripped the podium as if it were the only solid thing left in his universe. "This can't be real," he muttered, his face ashen. "The record stated you were." "David Chun reported that you had." "David Chun?" Amara repeated the name like a curse. "The man who sold my design to Aerotech for $50 million. And apparently, Aerotech sold it to you, Mr. Lark." She moved to the computer terminal, typing a few quick commands. The screen filled with the original Orion blueprints, complete with her embedded signatures in the code comments. "At Aerospace 2019, peppered throughout the documentation. This," she gestured to the screen, "is proof that your P9000 is an illegal copy of my work. And this," she held up her phone displaying legal documents, "is a cease and desist from my attorneys. Celestia Dynamics is facing a $500 million patent infringement lawsuit." Sebastian Lark collapsed into his chair, as if his legs had been severed from under him. But Amara's next words shocked the room further. "However, I'm not filing it." The stunned silence that followed was palpable. "I didn't come here for revenge or money. I came because I recognized my own design being corrupted into something that could kill innocent lives. That's all." She looked directly into the nearest camera, knowing her words would resonate far beyond this room. 5 years ago, I allowed love and trust to blind me to betrayal. I lost everything to one man's greed. But today, I choose not to let the past define my future. Today, I choose to repair what's broken and walk away. Amara moved to stand before Sebastian Lark, who seemed to have aged a decade in mere moments. "The engine is repaired. My consulting fee will be $1, the price of a cup of coffee, because engineering excellence shouldn't be measured by ego or gender, but by its ability to save lives." She turned to address the entire room one final time. "You want to know who I truly am? I'm someone who believes talent doesn't reside in diplomas hanging on walls or in the circumstances of birth. It lives in passion, dedication, and the courage to continue when the world tells you that you're not enough." The conference hall remained frozen in utter silence as Amara Torres gathered her simple canvas bag and prepared to leave. 200 people. The same engineers who had laughed at her, the executives who had schemed to humiliate her, the journalists who had come to document her failure, stood as statues carved from shame and revelation. Maya Chan was the first to break the spell, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Wait, please. I'm so sorry. What we did was unforgivable." Amara paused at the edge of the stage, turning back to look at the young woman who had been among her cruelest tormentors. "Sorry doesn't change what happened, Maya, but it might change what happens next." Lucas Morgan stepped forward, his Stanford class ring suddenly feeling like a shackle on his finger. "Dr. Torres, please stay. Celestia Dynamics needs someone like you. We could offer you any position, any salary." Amara interrupted gently. "What you need is to change your culture, not hire me to absolve your guilt. Look around this room. How many women are on your engineering team? How many people have you rejected because they didn't graduate from the right schools or fit a certain mold?" She gestured toward the repaired engine, its perfect hum filling the silence. "That machine doesn't care about your prejudices. Neither should you." Sebastian Lark finally found his voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. "I'll make this right, whatever it takes. I'll restore your reputation. Ensure everyone knows the truth. Mr. Lark, but you can do something else. You can open doors for the next Amara, the one who's sitting in a garage right now, dreaming of creating something extraordinary but being told she's not enough." A young reporter raised her hand tentatively. "Dr. Torres, where will you go now? Surely the aerospace company would want." "I'm going back to the library," Amara said simply, "where I help children from underserved neighborhoods learn about science, where an 8-year-old girl can dream about flying high without being told she's the wrong gender or the wrong class." She moved toward the exit, the crowd parting like a biblical sea, creating a path for the woman they had tried to destroy. At the door, Amara turned one last time, her silhouette framed by the afternoon light streaming through the glass. Someone once called me decorative window dressing. Pretty but useless, but every flower has thorns, and sometimes those thorns are necessary to protect the beauty within. She left then, walking out into the San Francisco afternoon, leaving behind a room full of people grappling with their assumptions and reality. Maya-chan sank into a chair, tears flowing freely now as she stared at her hands. The same hands that had pointed and mocked at a legend she hadn't recognized. Lucas Morgan removed his Stanford diploma from the wall, looking at it as if seeing for the first time how little it truly meant without humanity behind it. Sebastian Lark stood alone on the stage beside the $2.5 million engine saved by a woman he deemed unworthy, his empire of arrogance crumbling around him. The elderly journalist who had recognized Amara wrote the final lines in his notebook with a shaking hand. "Today, I witnessed the loudest silence I've ever heard, the moment when dignity triumphs over arrogance without raising its voice." Outside, Amara Torres disappeared into the San Francisco crowd just as she had vanished from Seattle 5 years ago. But this time she wasn't running from anything. She had found herself again in the most unlikely place, not in accolades or recognition, but in the simple act of doing what was right, despite those who would drag her down. Monday would find her back at the library, helping young minds discover the wonders of science, planting seeds of dreams and hearts that society might otherwise overlook. And somewhere among those children might be the next revolutionary, the next dreamer who would change the world if only someone believed in them. Some battles are won not with power but with dignity intact. Amara had chosen not to destroy those who had tried to humiliate her, not to wield her knowledge as a weapon of revenge. Instead, she had demonstrated something far more powerful: the strength to rise above, to fix what was broken, and to walk away with grace. In a world that often mistakes cruelty for strength and credentials for capability, she had shown that true power lies in knowing who you are, regardless of who others think you should be. If you were in her place, surrounded by those who aimed to break you, would you have chosen forgiveness over vengeance? Would you have repaired what was broken and walked away? Or would you have used your moment of triumph to crush those who had wronged you? The choice, like Amara's story, speaks to who we truly are.